Sarah Chen studied her reflection in the polished crystalline walls of the Galactic Council's antechamber, straightening the midnight blue collar of her United Earth diplomatic uniform. Her grandmother's jade pendant, a reminder of home, rested perfectly centered at her throat. The nervous energy of 200 alien species filled the massive chamber with a cacophony of whistles, clicks, and translator-assisted conversations. Ambassador Chen. A melodic voice chimed behind her. I strongly advise reconsidering your attendance at today's session. Sarah turned to face Ambassador Ixel, the Meridian representative who had become something of a mentor during her first month at the council. The tall, avian being's feathers shifted through shades of concerned amber. The Kithiri are particularly agitated today, Ixel continued, gesturing with an elegant wing toward the enormous doors leading to the main chamber. 3 delegates were injured last week when one of the guards perceived a threat. Sarah's gaze followed Ixel's gesture. The Kithiri in question stood silent and imposing, their crystalline scales refracting the chamber's light into dancing patterns across the walls. At 12 feet tall, with powerful digitigrade legs and arms that ended in gleaming talons, they cut intimidating figures. Their long serpentine tails swayed in slow patterns, and their elongated heads bore crown-like arrays of sensory spines. I've reviewed the incident reports, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady. All 3 delegates attempted to pass through the security checkpoint simultaneously, making rapid movements. Ixel's head crest flattened. You speak as if the Kithiri's reaction was reasonable. They are beasts, Ambassador Chen. Ancient weapons left over from the predecessor wars. The Council only maintains them as guards because no one has found a way to safely remove them. A small gathering of delegates had formed nearby, drawn by the conversation. A Volari administrator, their gelatinous form trembling slightly, floated closer. In my 90 cycles here, the Volari warbled through their translator. I've seen 16 diplomatic incidents involving the Kithiri. 2 were fatal. They cannot be reasoned with. Sarah watched the nearest Kithiri's tail movement change subtly as the group grew larger. The sensory spines atop its head flattened slightly, and its weight shifted to its back legs. The other delegates saw aggression, but Sarah recognized something else entirely. Have any of you ever tried to communicate with them? She asked, keeping her voice low and calm. The question drew nervous trills and clicks from the gathered aliens. A Xanthian elder, their crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly as they moved, joined the discussion. Communication with Kithiri. The elder's translator rendered their disbelief perfectly. Ambassador Chen, when the predecessors created them, they designed them for one purpose: to guard and to kill. They are living weapons, nothing more. Sarah felt the weight of her tablet in her pocket, filled with research notes and historical accounts. The official records painted the Kithiri as mindless guardians, yet their behaviors suggested something far more complex. She had spent weeks studying security footage, noting patterns that reminded her of the big cats at her grandmother's sanctuary. The main session begins in 10 minutes, Ixel reminded her gently. There's no shame in requesting a remote attendance link. Many delegates do, especially when the Kithiri show signs of agitation. Sarah straightened her shoulders, feeling her grandmother's pendant against her skin. Thank you for your concern, Ambassador Ixel, but I'll attend in person. Earth's first major proposal deserves a physical presence. The gathered delegates exchanged worried glances. Sarah understood their concern, but she couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was missing something obvious about the Kithiri. Their movements were too precise, their reactions too consistent to be mindless. As the warning chimes sounded for the main session, Sarah took her place in the entry line. The Kithiri's sensory spines tracked her movement, and for a brief moment, she could have sworn she saw something like curiosity in its iridescent eyes. The massive doors began to open, and Sarah Chen, carrying centuries of human experience with Earth's most dangerous predators, prepared to step into history. The Galactic Council chamber stretched upward in sweeping tiers of crystalline architecture, its transparent walls offering glimpses of the star-filled void beyond. Sarah sat among the newer member species delegation, her attention split between Senior Counselor Vex's speech about hyperspace lane regulations and the Kithiri Guard station nearest to her section. The proposed adjustment to Route 7 Alpha would reduce transport times by 32%. Vex's translator echoed through the chamber. Their multiple appendages gestured at the holographic display floating above the central platform. Sarah's hand moved across her tablet, but she wasn't taking notes on trade routes. Instead, she sketched the Kithiri's posture changes, the way it shifted weight when delegates moved too quickly, how its sensory spines elevated when voices grew heated during debates, the subtle tail movements that preceded every security response. The patterns tugged at old memories, summers spent at her grandmother's sanctuary, learning to read the body language of Earth's apex predators. She remembered her grandmother's voice, weathered by years of experience. Every movement tells a story, little one. You just need to learn their language. A Nexari delegate 2 rows ahead stood abruptly, their bioluminescent patches flaring with agitation. These route changes favor the outer rim economies. The Kithiri's tail stiffened, its scales catching the light differently. Sarah quickly added to her growing collection of behavior notes. Tension response to emotional displays. Protective rather than aggressive posturing. Ambassador Chen, whispered Delegate Soren, a silicon-based being seated beside her. You should focus on the trade proposals. These changes will affect Earth's shipping lanes significantly. Sarah nodded politely but continued her observations. The Kithiri had relaxed its posture after the Nexari delegate settled down, but its sensory spines remained partially elevated. She'd seen similar behavior in tigers maintaining awareness of their surroundings while at rest. During a particularly heated exchange about toll station placements, Sarah noticed something that made her sit up straighter. The Kithiri had shifted its position, placing itself between the most agitated delegates and the quieter species seated nearby. Not the action of a mindless weapon, but of a protector. She pulled up historical footage on her tablet, comparing it to her notes. The patterns were consistent across decades of council sessions. The Kithiri didn't attack randomly. They responded to perceived threats to the smaller or more vulnerable delegates. Strange, she muttered, drawing a curious look from Soren. What is strange, Ambassador? Sarah gestured subtly toward the Kithiri. They're not just guarding the chamber. They're guarding specific delegates. Watch their positioning when voices rise. As if on cue, another debate erupted, this time about resource rights. The Kithiri moved with fluid grace, their positions throughout the chamber adjusting in perfect synchronization. To most observers, it looked like standard security protocol. But Sarah saw the careful calculation in every movement. She thought of the lions at her grandmother's sanctuary, how they would position themselves between perceived threats and their pride members. The similarity was striking. The morning session drew to a close, and delegates began filing out for the lunch recess. Sarah remained in her seat, adding final notes to her observations. The chamber had nearly emptied when she noticed the nearest Kithiri watching her. Its iridescent eyes held an intelligence that made her wonder how everyone had missed it for so long. Making a decision, she saved her notes and stood slowly. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Respect must be earned, and trust goes both ways. The remaining delegates in the chamber gasped as Sarah turned not toward the exit, but toward the Kithiri. She knew what she had to do, even if every other species thought she was walking to her doom. Sometimes, she reflected, the greatest discoveries came from questioning what everyone else took for granted. And right now, Sarah Chin was quite certain that the galaxy had completely misunderstood the beings they called monsters. The council chamber fell into a hush as Sarah took her first measured step toward the Kithiri. Afternoon light streamed through the crystalline walls, casting rainbow refractions across the creature's scales. Several delegates froze mid-exit, their various appendages and sensory organs fixed on what they assumed would be a gruesome diplomatic incident. Ambassador Chen. Ixel's voice carried across the chamber, tight with concern. Step away slowly. Sarah kept her movements fluid and deliberate, remembering countless lessons from her grandmother. When approaching a predator, the old woman's voice whispered in her memory, "Your energy matters more than your size." The Katheri's head tilted slightly, its sensory spines adjusting to track her movement. Its tail maintained a steady, smooth rhythm that Sarah now recognized as a sign of curiosity rather than aggression. The chamber's remaining delegates held their breath collectively. 20 feet became 15. Sarah maintained eye contact, but kept her gaze soft, not challenging. She noticed subtle shifts in the Katheri's crystalline scales, patterns forming and dissolving like waves on an alien sea. The guards at other posts had turned to watch, their own spines and scales shifting in synchronized patterns. Security protocols demand immediate intervention. A mechanical voice announced over the chamber's communication system. Sarah recognized it as belonging to the council's eye overseer. "Override request." Sarah called out calmly, not breaking her careful approach. Diplomatic immunity allows for cultural exchange initiatives. The legal terminology felt strange in her mouth, but she needed these precious moments. 10 feet now separated them. The Katheri lowered its head slightly, bringing its iridescent eyes level with hers. This close, she could see subtle variations in its scales, marks that might indicate age or status. Its talons, each as long as her forearm, remained relaxed. "Grandmother," Sarah whispered to herself, "I hope you were right about this." At 5 feet, she stopped. The Katheri's sensory spines fanned out fully, creating a mesmerizing display of light and color. Sarah reached up slowly and removed her grandmother's jade pendant, holding it in her open palm. The green stone caught the light, throwing tiny emerald reflections onto the Katheri scales. "I offer you respect," she said softly, extending her hand palm down in the same way she'd approached nervous tigers at the sanctuary. "I offer you trust." The chamber's atmosphere grew thick with tension. Sarah heard the soft whir of security drones activating somewhere above, but she maintained her focus. The Katheri's tail movement changed, becoming slower, more purposeful. Then, with grace that seemed impossible for its massive frame, the Katheri lowered itself to one knee. Its movement created a cascade of light across its scales, and Sarah saw complex patterns emerge that reminded her of written language. Slowly, deliberately, the Katheri extended one massive hand. A single talon, gleaming like polished diamond, gently touched the jade pendant in Sarah's palm. The contact sent a subtle vibration through her arm, and she felt something brush against her consciousness, like a whisper in an empty room. "Contact established," she heard herself say, though her voice seemed to come from far away. Their touch telepaths. The Katheri's eyes, this close, contained swirling galaxies of color. Sarah felt tears well up in her own eyes as centuries of misunderstanding began to dissolve. Through the gentle contact point of talon and pendant, she sensed an ancient intelligence reaching out with equal parts hope and caution. Behind her, she heard Ixal's translator stutter, "Impossible." But Sarah knew better. She thought of every creature humanity had ever befriended, from wolves to elephants, from eagles to whales. Today, they would add another chapter to that legacy of trust and understanding. The Katheri's mind touched hers again, and this time, Sarah smiled. The real conversation was about to begin. The initial connection felt like standing at the edge of an ancient ocean. Sarah remained perfectly still as the Katheri's consciousness met hers through the gentle contact point of talon and jade. The massive chamber, with its watching delegates and hovering security drones, seemed to fade into the background. Images began to flow between them, a cascade of shared experiences. Sarah opened her memories first, showing trust by making herself vulnerable. She shared the sanctuary. Golden African sunsets, the rumble of lions greeting the morning. Tigers swimming in crystal pools. The Katheri's sensory spines rippled with interest as it absorbed scenes of humans working alongside Earth's most dangerous predators. "Amazing," Sarah whispered as the Katheri began to share in return. She saw vast crystal forests stretching toward twin suns, their branches singing in solar winds. Young Catheri learning to control their telepathic abilities, their scales shifting through patterns that she now recognized as complex emotional expressions. Through their connection, Sarah felt the deep sadness of centuries of isolation. The Catheri had served as guardians since the time of the predecessors, watching species after species shrink away in fear. Their attempts at communication had been met with terror, their protective instincts misinterpreted as aggression. "You've been trying to talk to us all along," Sarah projected the thought gently. The tail movements, the spine displays, they're all language. The Catheri, who shared its name as a complex pattern of light and emotion that Sarah's mind translated as Crystal Singer, confirmed with a ripple of grateful acknowledgement. Their species had evolved as protectors, using their imposing physical presence and telepathic abilities to safeguard other sentient races. Sarah shared memories of working with big cats, showing how humans learned to read body language and respect boundaries. Crystal Singer's response carried surprised recognition. The principles were remarkably similar to their own social structures. Ambassador Chen. Ixel's voice penetrated the telepathic exchange, heavy with concern. "Are you? Well?" Without breaking the connection, Sarah spoke aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed chamber. "I'm experiencing a cultural exchange with a member of an incredibly sophisticated species that we've misunderstood for generations." Through their link, Crystal Singer shared the truth about the recent security incidents. The Catheri had been trying to prevent conflicts, stepping in when they sensed hostile intentions between delegates. Their inability to communicate their protective purpose had led to tragic misunderstandings. Sarah felt a deep ache as she witnessed memories of Catheri trying desperately to save delegates from each other, only to be branded as mindless beasts. She shared her own pain at seeing magnificent Earth creatures feared and hunted due to similar misunderstandings. "But we learned," she projected, showing scenes of conservation efforts, rehabilitation programs, and successful human-animal partnerships. "We learned to bridge the gap between species. We can help bridge this one too." Crystal Singer's response carried hope tinged with caution. The Catheri had witnessed countless failed attempts at interspecies understanding. Yet something about humanity's experience with Earth's predators resonated deeply with them. The connection began to fade naturally, like a tide receding. Sarah lowered her hand, the jade pendant warm against her palm. Crystal Singer rose to its full height, its scales now displaying patterns that Sarah recognized as formal respect. The chamber remained silent as Sarah turned to face the watching delegates. She saw fear, confusion, and the first glimmers of understanding on various alien faces. Centuries of assumptions were crumbling, and in their place, something new could grow. "We've been wrong about the Catheri," she announced, her voice steady. "And I can prove it. They're not weapons. They're guardians. They've been protecting us all along, waiting for someone to finally listen." Behind her, Crystal Singer's scales shifted into patterns that reminded Sarah of a sunrise. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in centuries, the silence between species had been broken. Word of the successful contact spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. Delegates huddled in corners of the Great Chamber, their universal translators working overtime as they shared theories and observations. Security footage of Sarah's interaction with Crystal Singer played on personal devices throughout the building. "Look at the scale patterns," a young Meridian scientist pointed out to her colleagues, her feathers shimmering with excitement. "They're not random. It's a form of visual communication we've been missing for centuries." Sarah stood at the center of a growing crowd, fielding questions while keeping one eye on the Catheri guards. Crystal Singer had resumed its post, but its posture seemed different now, more open, less rigid. Other Catheri throughout the chamber displayed similar changes, their sensory spines moving in what she now recognized as expressions of cautious optimism. Ambassador Chen called out a Volari administrator, their gelatinous form rippling with curiosity. "How did you know they were touch telepaths?" "I didn't," Sarah admitted, touching her grandmother's pendant. I recognized behavioral patterns similar to Earth's apex predators and trusted my training. The telepathic connection was as much a surprise to me as anyone. More human diplomats arrived, summoned by urgent messages from their colleagues. Sarah began teaching them the basics of Kithiri body language, pointing out the subtle differences between defensive and welcoming postures. The other Kithiri watched with interest, their scales shifting in patterns that Sarah now understood as approval. Slow movements, respectful distance, she explained to her fellow humans. Watch their tail positions. It's like reading a cat's body language, just on a much grander scale. A junior human diplomat named Marcus stepped forward, his movements careful and measured as Sarah had taught. The nearest Kithiri responded by lowering its head slightly, matching the respectful gesture. The watching delegates murmured in amazement as decades of tension began to dissolve. The Council Security Committee requests an immediate session, announced the AI overseer. All senior delegates please report to Chamber 3. Sarah found herself in the committee chamber, surrounded by the most influential members of the council. Crystal Singer stood behind her, not as a guard this time, but as a participant. Its scales rippled with formal diplomatic patterns as it shared memories of ancient Kithiri history through brief telepathic contacts with willing delegates. We must revise centuries of security protocols, declared Senior Counselor Vex, their appendages moving in excited patterns. The Kithiri aren't our servants. They're an advanced species deserving of full diplomatic recognition. Ixel, whose initial warnings had given way to fascinated support, raised a wing. We should establish a permanent human Kithiri liaison office. Earth's experience with dangerous species makes them uniquely qualified to facilitate this transition. The chamber buzzed with plans and proposals. Sarah watched as Crystal Singer shared another memory with a fascinated Xanthian elder, their crystalline forms creating spectacular light patterns where they touched. The fear that had permeated the council for generations was being replaced by curiosity and wonder. Ambassador Chen called out a voice she recognized as belonging to the council's chief historian. How many other species have we misunderstood? How many potential allies have we dismissed as threats? Sarah thought of Earth's long history of human-animal partnerships, of bridges built across seemingly impossible divides. That's what humans do best, she replied. We look past the surface to find connection points. Sometimes, the most dangerous-looking creatures turn out to be the most loyal friends. As the session continued, Sarah noticed other Kithiri entering the chamber, not as guards, but as participants. Their scales danced with complex patterns of thought and emotion, adding their voices to the discussion through careful telepathic exchanges. The galaxy was changing, one connection at a time. And humanity, with its unique history of befriending the feared and misunderstood, was helping to lead the way. Sarah stood at the entrance of the Crystal Valley, her environmental suits display adjusting to the prismatic light show created by Kithiri Prime's twin suns. Crystal Singer led the first official diplomatic delegation through their homeworld, its scales shimmering with pride and subtle patterns that Sarah now recognized as excitement. The valley holds our oldest histories, Crystal Singer communicated through their now familiar telepathic link. The massive Kithiri gestured toward towering crystal walls that stretched upward for what seemed like miles. The human delegation, consisting of xenobiologists, linguists, and diplomatic staff, moved forward and practiced respectful formations. They had all trained extensively in Kithiri etiquette over the past month, learning to read the basic scale patterns and respect telepathic boundaries. The patterns, Dr. Emily Rodriguez, Earth's leading xenolinguist, breathed in wonder. They're not just art, they're mathematical formulas. Sarah touched her hand to a crystal face, accepting Crystal Singer's invitation to share deeper understanding. The connection bloomed in her mind, and suddenly she saw it. The valley walls contained sophisticated calculations describing spatial dynamics, gravitational theories, and concepts that human mathematics hadn't yet discovered. Our ancestors carved their knowledge into the living crystal, Crystal Singer explained through their link. The formations grow, but the patterns remain, passed down through generations. Professor Chen Wei, a quantum physicist from Luna University, carefully documented the equations with his specialized equipment. His hands trembled with excitement as he worked. This section alone could revolutionize our understanding of fold space technology. The delegation moved deeper into the valley, where crystal spires created natural amphitheaters. Here, young Kithiri gathered to learn from their elders, their scales shifting in educational patterns that reminded Sarah of classroom discussions. "Your species handles knowledge differently than most," Crystal Singer observed, sharing memories of other diplomatic visits. "Others seek to download and store. You seek to understand." Sarah smiled, sharing her own memory of her grandmother teaching her to read tiger body language. Humans learn best through experience and connection. We don't just want information, we want understanding. The next chamber left even the seasoned xenobiologists speechless. Crystal formations created three-dimensional star maps, showing gravitational flows and energy patterns that the most advanced council races hadn't yet mapped. The Kithiri had been observing and recording this data for millennia, their very homes serving as scientific instruments. "Your navigation charts," Dr. Rodriguez said, her voice filled with awe. "They're not just maps, they're living documents of space-time." Through their telepathic connection, Crystal Singer shared the true scope of Kithiri knowledge. Their species hadn't just been guarding the council, they had been studying the galaxy itself, recording their observations in their crystalline architecture, waiting for a species that would understand the importance of their work. "We observed," Crystal Singer explained, "its patterns shifting to convey deep meaning. We protected, we recorded, we waited for those who would see us as more than weapons." Sarah felt the weight of centuries in that statement. The Kithiri had possessed this knowledge all along, but fear and misunderstanding had prevented anyone from discovering it. Until humanity, with its unique perspective on dangerous but intelligent species, had thought to simply reach out in friendship. The delegation spent hours documenting and learning, each discovery more profound than the last. The Kithiri's understanding of spatial mechanics, their grasp of energy flows, their insights into gravitational dynamics, all of it had been hidden in plain sight, encoded in the very structures that everyone had dismissed as simple crystal formations. As the twin suns began to set, casting the valley in sheets of rainbow light, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. The Kithiri weren't just sharing their knowledge. They were inviting humanity to join them in their ancient mission of observation and protection. The galaxy's greatest library had been discovered, not in some ancient alien vault, but in the home of the species everyone had feared to understand. The observation deck of the Earth-Kithiri Joint Research Vessel Horizon Bridge offered a spectacular view of the neutron star cluster they were studying. Sarah watched as Crystal Singer's scales reflected the intense light, creating complex patterns that matched the mathematical models displayed on the ship's holographic screens. The gravitational fluctuations matched the ancient records. Crystal Singer communicated, its telepathic touch now as familiar to Sarah as spoken words. But there's something new forming here. The human Kithiri crew worked in seamless coordination around them. 6 months into their joint exploration mission, the initial awkwardness had given way to profound synergy. Humans' intuitive problem-solving complemented the Kithiri's ancient knowledge perfectly. Dr. Rodriguez floated over to their station, her zero-gravity movements practiced and precise. The linguistic analysis of the crystal patterns is revealing new layers of information. The Kithiri didn't just record scientific data, they created a four-dimensional language. Sarah watched as a young Kithiri named Dawnweaver demonstrated a complex series of scale patterns to a group of human scientists. The patterns depicted gravitational waves in a way that made the abstract concepts almost tangible. Several researchers were taking notes, their expressions bright with understanding. "Incoming transmission from Galactic Council," announced the ship's eye. "Priority 1. The main screen activated, showing Senior Counselor Vex. Their appendages moved in excitement as they spoke. The joint mission's findings have been validated. The Council unanimously approves the establishment of the Interspecies Scientific Coalition. Crystal Singer's scales rippled with patterns of joy and pride. The coalition had been their dream. A gathering of species working together to understand the universe, free from fear and prejudice. Humanity's willingness to bridge the gap had made it possible. Furthermore, Vex continued, the Kithiri delegation's proposal for updating our space lane navigation systems has been approved. Implementation begins immediately. Sarah shared a moment of satisfaction with Crystal Singer. The Kithiri's deep understanding of gravitational flows, combined with human intuitive engineering, had produced navigation systems far superior to anything currently in use. The Council also reports 17 new successful first contacts. Vex added, the human Kithiri diplomatic approach is proving remarkably effective with previously classified dangerous species. Around the ship, humans and Kithiri continued their work. A junior navigator consulted with their Kithiri counterpart, their hands moving in shared gestures that mixed human sign language with Kithiri scale patterns. In the research lab, scientists of both species worked on translating more of the Crystal Valley's ancient knowledge. We've discovered something extraordinary, Crystal Singer shared privately with Sarah. Its scales shifted into patterns she recognized as profound revelation. The neutron star cluster. It's not just a stellar formation, it's a message. Sarah felt her heart race as Crystal Singer shared the visualization. The gravitational patterns, viewed through Kithiri understanding and human perspective, formed a clear signature of artificial origin. It seems we're not the only ones who left messages in Crystal, Sarah said softly. Should we tell the Council? Crystal Singer's response carried warmth and trust. We'll tell them together. Humans teach us to face the unknown with courage. We teach you to see the patterns in chaos. Together, we're ready for whatever comes next. On the main deck, a human physicist and a K-theory elder were already discussing the implications, their shared excitement transcending species barriers. The crew of the Horizon Bridge had become more than a successful experiment in cooperation. They were pioneers of a new way of exploring the galaxy. Sarah touched her grandmother's jade pendant, now wrapped in a delicate lattice of living crystal, a gift from Crystal Singer. She thought of that first careful approach in the council chamber, and all the bridges that had been built since then. Ready to decode another mystery, she asked Crystal Singer, gesturing toward the glowing cluster of stars. The Kithiri scales danced with patterns of adventure and friendship, concepts that, not long ago, most species thought them incapable of expressing. Together, they turned toward the unknown, ready to show the galaxy what humans and Kithiri could achieve in true partnership. The new Kithiri embassy on Earth gleamed in the morning sunlight, its crystal spires designed to capture and share knowledge in the traditional Kithiri way. Sarah stood at the podium, Crystal Singer beside her, as they prepared to address the gathered crowd of humans and aliens. 5 years ago, Sarah began, her voice carrying across the assembled dignitaries. A simple act of trust changed the galaxy. Today, we celebrate not just the opening of an embassy, but the birth of a new era of understanding. The embassy's main hall featured a magnificent crystal matrix that displayed both Earth's history with its apex predators and the story of human Kithiri first contact. Delegates from across the Galactic Council moved through the space, their expressions filled with wonder as Kithiri guides shared their stories through controlled telepathic exchanges. Ambassador Chen called out a young reporter. How has the human Kithiri partnership influenced council policies? Crystal Singer's scales shifted in a pattern that Sarah knew meant pride. Through their years of working together, they had developed a deep understanding that went beyond mere telepathy. The numbers speak for themselves, Sarah responded. 57 previously isolated species have joined the council. First contact protocols now emphasize understanding over fear. The embassy's research wing buzzed with activity. Human scientists worked alongside Kithiri scholars, their combined knowledge leading to breakthroughs in everything from medicine to space travel. The crystal walls recorded their discoveries, growing and changing to incorporate new understanding. The message we discovered in the neutron star cluster. A senior K-theory scientist shared telepathically with the audience. Its scales dancing with excitement has led us to evidence of 15 other ancient civilizations. Humanity's courage to explore, combined with our pattern recognition, has opened doors we never knew existed. Sarah watched as a group of children, human and alien alike, received their first lesson in reading K-theory scale patterns. Gone were the days of fear and misunderstanding. The new generation would grow up seeing the K-theory as they truly were: teachers, protectors, and friends. The Galactic University Network has approved the expansion, announced Dr. Rodriguez, now the head of Sino-Linguistics at the new institution. Earth will host the first combined campus, with crystal architecture designed to facilitate learning for all species. Crystal Singer touched Sarah's mind gently, sharing a memory of their first meeting in the council chamber. The fear and tension of that day felt like ancient history now. In its place stood a partnership that had transformed galactic society. Our greatest strength, Sarah addressed the crowd, was never in our technologies or our weapons. It was in our ability to reach across the divide, to see intelligence and friendship where others saw only threat. The ceremony concluded with a spectacular display of K-theory scale patterns, synchronized with human music, a new art form that had emerged from their partnership. The patterns told the story of two species who dared to trust, and the galaxy that changed as a result. Later, in the embassy's private garden, Sarah and Crystal Singer shared a quiet moment. The K-theory scales shifted in patterns of nostalgia and contentment. "Your grandmother would be proud," Crystal Singer communicated. "She taught you to see past appearances, to find the intelligence behind the fear." Sarah touched her jade pendant, now a symbol of human K-theory cooperation recognized across the galaxy. "She taught me that understanding comes from patience and respect." The rest of the galaxy just needed a reminder. Above them, the stars twinkled with promise. The human K-theory exploration fleets were making new discoveries daily, approaching each unknown with a combination of courage and wisdom that had become their trademark. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The species they had feared as mindless guardians had become their greatest teachers, and humanity's gift for building bridges had helped make it possible. As the sun set on the new embassy, its crystal spires recording another day of shared knowledge, Sarah and Crystal Singer turned their gaze to the stars. There were still mysteries to solve, bridges to build, and stories to tell. And together, they would face whatever waited beyond the next horizon.